Meet the Maker today is here with Sue Prince in her studio. Thank you so much, Sue, for inviting us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's great to have you here. Thank you for coming.
I'm just so amazed and impressed by your work. I just find it so imaginative and inspiring. But it's also quite unusual. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey of how you came to do the very specialised art that you do?
Well, yes. I'd never developed my own voice. But at that point, my head was full of my stories that I wanted to paint, but I hadn't got a voice with which to express these. So I was kind of quite frustrated. I was very inspired by the Bayeux Tapestry. The storytelling of the Bayeux Tapestry is just brilliant. It's hilarious and it's very clear with sort of figures pointing, and big people are important and small people are little. And so it all sort of, I loved that whole notion of storytelling. So in this church hall in Sweden, I saw up on the wall what looked like a tapestry, but it was painted and it was on linen. And I was just incredibly inspired by it. So it was something a bit like this one. I just needed to know what it was. And at this stage, we were organic farmers here on the farm at Beechin Hill. Sustainability and the environment and all of that is incredibly important to me. And when I found out that these traditional paintings were painted on recycled linen that had been grown by the farmer, the flax had been grown by the farmer, it was woven into sheets and shirts and towels, and then when it was worn out and too thin to use, it was given to the painters. And the paint was egg tempura, so it was made of local materials. It was egg yolk and pigment, local pigments. And well, my head just exploded and I thought, I've got to find out more about this. So I had a little tiny guidebook to a museum. I couldn't actually get into the museum because it was closed at that point, but I took this little guidebook home, and in my studio I experimented, and that was the first painting I did. I looked up the historical information about egg tempura painting, and I kind of worked out how to do it. I then took back to Sweden the paintings that I'd done, and the people in Sweden said, "Oh, but this is dead. Can you teach us?" And so I thought, "Wow, gosh." Well, I said, "Well, I can share what I've learned, and we can learn together." So for 11 years, I ran summer schools in Sweden, teaching Swedish folk art, and it was wonderful, and it was so life affirming and fabulous and positive for me personally, and that's when it all sort of blossomed and bloomed, and for me it was the greatest gift, and Sweden has given me this amazing gift of this technique.
How do you think your art captures the kind of the historic style of this folk art, and how much have you kind of developed it with your illustrative background?
So I fell in love particularly with one artist, Johannes Nilsson, this guy. I just fell in love with his palette and his way of telling a story, and I found out more about him in that he had epilepsy, so he was unable to farm. He was unable to be a labourer in the fields. He never travelled more than 30 miles away from where he lived. He'd never seen the sea, or he'd never travelled anywhere. So he told all his stories through his own place. So through his houses and his food, his tables, his horses, and all of that. And when I saw his work, I thought, oh God, this gives me permission. He's giving me permission to tell my stories through my place and my things that have, my house and my transport and my clothing and all of that. If you look sometimes at my later work, and you compare it to Johannes Nielsen, you won't see that many things that are similar. But for me, they're all similar because I'm still using his palette. I'm always using a thin red line to line my pictures. I love the notion of having text in as part of a picture. But of course, Johannes Nielsen couldn't read or write, so sometimes the letters aren't quite right. He's just copied what he's seen on this piece of writing. And so there are quite a lot of mistakes, and it's so charming. It's just so human. The more I learn about how to use egg tempera, the more in love I fall with it. For fine art, egg tempera, it's all about the layers and the underpainting and layer upon layer upon layer. Because the more egg you put into the pigment, and more water, it becomes more and more of a glaze, and so you just build up the glazes and you get this incredibly beautiful rich colours and rich depth to the pictures.
Where do you get your inspiration for your subjects for your paintings?
Well, I'm a storyteller. I know I'm a storyteller, but I'm also, I think I'm an observer of our society and how we live, and I'm really interested. I mean, my strapline, if you like, is people and their places, and I'm interested in the whole impact of people on our planet. I'm into sustainability and environment and all that, but I will suddenly be hit by something and have to paint about it. And often it's something that's happened in our society. And I've done things like the London riots in 2011, that I immediately, it seemed so plain to me why that happened, because there were two levels of society, each twisted and tumbled by the other, but each invisible to the other. I did a refugee painting about about Syria, when the refugees were coming, and all the flipping newspapers were saying, "Oh, they got mobile phones. Oh, they," and they were, and I was thinking, God Almighty, if I was being bombed, the first thing I would take is my mobile phone, because that's one way of staying in touch with your family, and checking what's happening and being safe. And so that made me think, what would happen if we were bombed? So I did a painting of that. I did a painting of my village up the road being bombed, and us all fleeing with our dogs and our children and our old people, and how would we manage and what would we take?
I think the first time I became aware of your work was in your chronicles of lockdown at the time of COVID, and I was just so incredibly moved by this historical record you made of those events. How did that come about?
I heard the announcement of lockdown on the 23rd of March, and I thought, this is something that's so unbelievably unique for mankind, for personkind. We're all going to be affected by this. The whole world is going to be affected by this. And so I decided I would do a painting a day. I called them the Isolation Chronicles, and each day things would happen, and I'd make a list of the sort of things, but I'd also keep an eye on the news. Each day I'd decide which painting I was going to do, and because they were very small, they were relatively quick. And then in the morning, I'd take a picture of it, and then in the morning, while I was still in bed, I'd share them to social media. I put them onto Instagram and Facebook, the square format, very useful. And I got this really big following of people, and they were saying, "Oh, you're keeping us going. We wonder, we come down to breakfast and we say, oh, what's she done today?" And then people started to say, "You've got to do a book, you've got to do a book." And I thought, I don't know how to do a book. So a friend who does all my printing and stuff like that, he's brilliant. He and I discovered how to do books, and we produced the Isolation Chronicles, book 1 and book 2. And I'm very proud of them. They're lovely, and they are a historical record, because the picture is on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side there's a few words about the picture, but at the bottom of the left hand side there's the news from that day. So it's an actual record. What I didn't realise was in the pandemic, the 1918 pandemic, nobody really kept records, or it was so horrific that they just wanted to forget about it and move on. And so I didn't want that to be the case for us. And I mean, mine was just a little tiny farm in the Peak District, and just the little goings on here, really, and the news that we were hearing, and bloody Dominic Cummings, and sorry, and all of that was going on. And so I'm amazed that so many people bought the books, and I've had such lovely feedback from them. It's been brilliant. In fact, somebody bought one this morning. Well, welcome to my gallery. This building used to be a hay barn when we were farming, and the cows were milked downstairs when we first came here, and then hay was stored upstairs. It fell into disrepair when we built a milking parlour, so we decided we had to do something with it. We designed this, which is a multi-purpose floor downstairs. It's underheated, and then this upstairs with the glass gallery is my gallery, where I can put all my paintings. We use it every May bank holiday for Derbyshire Open Arts, and share the space with 10 or so other Peak District artisans, and it makes a gorgeous display space. But for me, it's where I can put my paintings up, and if I'm in, it's open. And that's my ranty Adam and Eve. Very ranty.
What's the rant about Adam and Eve?
Oh, God. Well, it's women's fault for everything, isn't it? There was Eve, a very bright, interested person, curious person. She's looking to feed them both, looking for what's around. And there's this lovely tree. You will notice that the tree is full of fossils, and that it's the tree of life, so it's the fossils, the amoeba and everything at the bottom, and then going up through into mammals and fish and all sorts. It's all in Peak District. And then God got very cross because she'd taken an apple, but man didn't defend her. He didn't stick up for her. He said, "She made me do it." I thought, good gosh. I was very cross when I read that. And then the gates of Eden are Ashbourne Park Gate, and that's when they were thrown out. It's just ridiculous. You see, people might look at that and think there's not so much similarity with the whole Swedish folk art thing, but it is absolutely. It's using the Egg Tempura paints, the palette, and it's got the red frame around it, and it's telling the story of ash dieback and kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending things with gold. So I'm trying to mend the broken vascular system in the ash tree with gold, little tiny touches of gold.
I just love what you said so far, but what about the future, Sue? How is your work going to develop?
Oh, I just don't know. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed recently with Peak District Artisans, PDA, we've been having collaborations and working with each other. And last year I worked with Rachel Evans, who's the Wheatcroft willow weaver, and we worked together. Also with Viv Silla, who's a potter. So I made a pottery figure of Rachel weaving, and then she wove a container for it. It was such a wonderful experience. So things like that introduce new challenges and new ideas are really buzzy for the future. My painting as it is, I will continue when things move me and I feel able to, as I say, at the moment, because of society, what's going on, I feel I'm a bit stuck, but I will continue to paint what moves me.
That's just amazing. Thank you so much, Sue, for telling me all about your work. I'm really excited to see what these new collaborations are going to bring.
I know, it's amazing.